The guitar seemed to take on a new role in the 60s, taking over from the previously dominant brass sections of jazz to becoming the hottest commodity in the music world, coinciding with a shift to rock and roll. During this transition, a plethora of would-be guitarists, inspired by the blues greats before them, picked up the instrument and experimented with its sound, pushing the guitar to the next level. Jimmy Page proved instrumental in the 60s and 70s in changing the perception of how the guitar could be played. Making a name for himself as a session musician, Page quickly climbed the ranks throughout the 60s to become one of the greatest guitar players of all time, pushing the boundaries of the instrument with the Yardbirds, and even more so in Led Zeppelin, where he pioneered a musical shift into hard rock. Page has made his admiration known for many guitarists over the years, so let's go through them, starting with his 70s contemporaries. Page spoke to Rolling Stone in 1975 about his favourite guitar players, and the interview provides a brilliant snapshot of that time. Out of all the guitarists to come out of the 60s though, Beck, Clapton, Lee, Townshend and I are still having a go. That says something. Beck, Clapton and I were sort of the Richmond/Croydon type clan, and Alvin Lee, I don't know where he came from, Leicester or something like that, so he was never in with it a lot. And Townshend was from Middlesex, and he used to go down to the clubs and watch the other guitarists. It's an interesting statement here of who Page thinks are the top guitarists from that 60s and early 70s scene, an insight into which of his contemporaries he respected the most. He even threw a compliment to Pete Townshend, despite Pete later revealing that he wasn't a fan of Led Zeppelin at all. In fact, I've made a video just about this. I'll pop it up there in the corner if you fancy giving it a watch. Now, I want to stick with Jeff Beck for a second here, because although Jimmy Page just sort of bundled him in with that list in that 1975 interview, I, like many others, believe that Jeff Beck really managed to stand out among that crowd. He continued to innovate and experiment and never rested on his laurels as a guitar player. He consistently had an urge to outdo his last work and keep the guitar world surprised at his abilities. When Page first met Jeff Beck, they bonded over a mutual love of Gene Vincent and his cover of Little Walter's My Babe. In 2020, Page told Rolling Stone, "The very first time I met Jeff, I said, 'What's your version of My Babe?' to see how he played it. And I said, 'Yeah, well, I've been doing it like this.' He just had an instant rapport with me." Continuing with Gene Vincent, Page said, "As each release came with the Gene Vincent stuff, it was really challenging to even attempt to play it. But once you had a solid body guitar, as opposed to a cello body, it became more doable. Nevertheless, you were fueled to do the best you could, and it's quite right." Back to Beck, Page had always been in admiration of his abilities. In 2009, Page had the honour of inducting Jeff Beck into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, where he made his true feelings known.
Because Jeff's whole guitar style it's just totally unorthodox to the way that anyone was taught, and he's just really developed a whole style that of expanding the electric guitar and making it into something which was just sounds and techniques totally unheard of before, and that's just an amazing feat, believe me.
Again, speaking to Rolling Stone in 1975, Page showed some admiration for two overseas guitarists. The first of which is Amos Garrett, American-Canadian blues and blues rock musician, probably best known for his incredible solos on Maria Muldaur's Midnight at the Oasis and Paul Butterfield's cover of Please Send Me Someone to Love. The second is American musician Elliot Randall. Like Page, Randall made his start as a session musician. He's known for contributing to Irene Cara's fame and also performing the solo on Steely Dan's Reelin' in the Years, a solo that's considered among the best of all time. Another musician that Page admires greatly is American bluegrass and country guitarist Clarence White. In fact, he once described him as absolutely brilliant. White was best known for his work in the Byrds and the Kentucky Colonels. And again, like many of the guitarists on this list, White was a session musician. He played alongside the likes of Joe Cocker, Randy Newman, the Everly Brothers, and Jackson Browne. I do think it's interesting that a lot of these names on this list are session musicians. As a former session musician himself, I feel like Page has a deep understanding and appreciation of that type of work. Because with lists like this naming your favourite guitarists, it would be easy just to name the big stars, the famous names that everybody knows. But Page isn't blinded by all of that, he's focusing purely on the guitar playing ability of these people. It's awesome to see. Back to Clarence White, unfortunately his talent was taken away from us far too soon. In 1973, he was hit by a drunk driver, killing him at the age of 29. The most heartbreaking thing is that the day before he died, he committed to a musical project with Roger McGuinn, his former bandmate from the Byrds. Who knows what White could have brought to the table in that band? Who knows what the world missed out on? Could he have been another Frank Zappa or Van Halen? In a 2017 interview, Page also talked about his very early influences. It was almost like doing a university course. So you were just learning and learning and learning. At the end, you come up with your paper. So I guess my paper was Led Zeppelin. One of those artists was rockabilly pioneer Johnny Burnett. Page told Rolling Stone in 2020, "I mean, one of the records that stopped you in your tracks was 1956's Johnny Burnett and the Rock and Roll Trio. The musical glue of that record is just absolutely phenomenal. Also, the guitar playing was so abstract to anything else that I'd ever heard." Another guitarist that Jimmy Page admired greatly was Scotty Moore, who worked with Elvis Presley. Page once shared a memory to his Instagram page of presenting Moore with a guitar at Air Studios in 1999. He said, "Scotty Moore had been a major inspiration in my early transitory days from acoustic to electric guitar. His character guitar playing on those early Elvis Sun recordings and later at RCA was monumental. It was during the 50s that these types of song-shaping guitar parts helped me see the importance of the electric guitar approach to music." Now, before we get onto the top guitarist on Jimmy Page's list, just a note to say that, of course, there are loads of guitarists that I've not mentioned in this video, because quite frankly, if I did, it would be hours long. But Page did show his admiration over the years for the likes of Muddy Waters, Chet Atkins, Glenn Campbell, Jerry Reed, Elmore James, Robert Johnson, and, like I said, many, many more. If I did miss out on any big ones, be sure to let me know in the comments down below. Now, it probably comes as no surprise to you that the guitarist Page called the best is none other than Jimi Hendrix. In 1975, talking about his untimely death, Page said, "We've lost the best guitarist any of us ever had, and that was Hendrix." Asked if he had ever met Jimi Hendrix, Page had this to say, "I did actually go into a club in New York called Salvation, and he was there, but he was totally out of it. It's just kind of a shame that I never really had the chance to talk with him or hear him. I heard his records, naturally, but it would have been a thrill to see how he worked things out on stage. That's quite another ballgame, as you know." In one interview from around 1990, Jimmy Page had a lot to say about Jimi Hendrix's ability with the guitar. Have a listen.
Well, with guitarists, there's usually innovators, or there's the one who comes along at a particular period of time who can sort of capture everything that's going on at that particular period of time and sort of put it into a melting pot and come out with like something that appears to be very new, you know. Well, he certainly did that in his very early days, you know, as far as I can see. And he went on from that to be quite an innovator, most certainly in the recording studio. In fact, that was the thing that impressed me the most in the early days. He was so far ahead of anybody else with his recording techniques. And he was pretty damn sure that he was going to get it across as well. I mean, there's little segments like The Gods Made Love, you know, which is so beyond anything that anybody had done at that point. And I really thought, after he passed away, that, you know, another sort of 5-10 years' time, people would actually recognise the technological aspect of that, but it actually hasn't come across so much, but it surprises me.
Now, how does this list compare to David Gilmour's list of his favourite guitarists? Watch this video next to find out.